So,
All right.
Okay, we're recording.
hey, hashtag 15 years, friends.
Or 9, we're not sure. It might
we're
be
not
9.
sure anymore. Gordon Clark here with Kevin Martin behind the camera, and we're joined today by Peter Hope, who is a professor of biology here at St. Michael's College, just outside Burlington, Vermont. Thanks for being with us, Peter.
Glad to be here.
And,
Peter P. Funk Hope, according to that plaque right there, which is awesome.
Students gave me that.
I love it.
Peter and I met actually at Reuben James sports bar down in Burlington during one of the games of the World Series this past fall.
Whichever one was on Halloween.
Started talking, and we found out that Peter teaches a course on climate change in addition to being a biology professor here. So we thought we'd come and talk with him a little bit.
Well, that was when we thought the Cubs winning the World Series would spell the end of civilization, but luckily it didn't.
One of the four horsemen, Kevin.
Okay, yes, you and your horsemen of the apocalypse.
Trump's
all right.
getting elected. Chicago winning another. That's two.
Okay.
So in any event, a couple quick questions. How long have you been a professor here?
Since '92, so about 25 years.
Okay. And how long have you been teaching the climate change class?
I have just about 6 years, but I taught environmental science before that.
Okay.
And it always had a big component of climate change.
And it's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the only climate change course that's taught here at St. Michael's, the one you do? Is that correct?
Yeah, yep. There are a bunch of good environmental justice and things like that touch on it from different disciplines. So we really hit it kind of from a lot of areas. And there's water courses, geography courses that deal with it too. So the school does a pretty good job of hitting it from a lot of different disciplines.
And I guess the key thing is climate change is going to hit a lot of disciplines on its own. So if you're not addressing it, you're not actually teaching the discipline these days. So we may be answering that question already, but why did you start teaching the class on climate change?
Well, just to kind of narrow the focus, because we had a new person teaching an environmental science course. So I just decided I would just go into the climate change one. And really my environmental science was becoming more and more climate change all the time, because it's just so pressing and affecting everything else that it just seemed to be a natural progression.
Okay. Young people and climate change. So you have regular attendance at your class, obviously. If it's gone for 6 years, people must take it.
Yep.
What would you say is the general perspective or outlook on the young people that you teach around climate change?
They're kind of discouraged because they see that they're getting handed a world that is changing very fast, and they're aware of species disappearing and the potential, and also the potential of just how it's just going to affect so many different things. So I used to, when I first started teaching it, I would have one or two students that were skeptical and kind of would challenge me on it, and I really don't get that
None of them anymore.
Yeah, there's just nobody that doesn't accept it, and I basically say in the first class that it's not a debate about whether it's happening, it's trying to discuss, learning about it.
No one who doesn't accept it who isn't currently serving in the Trump administration, just to be clear.
Yes.
There are still a few holdouts. They seem to be running the government right now.
Yeah, a friend of mine suggested I have him in my class recently.
That would be a hoot.
Yeah.
Another question is, and in terms of the science itself, and you were talking about things rapidly changing, one of the things in our studying of the issue is that most of the articles that we see are still talking about carbon emissions, which is obviously where this all started. But we're also greatly concerned by the information that we've seen recently about methane, and specifically in terms of permafrost melting and Arctic, ice melting and the release of that from the seabed. Yet relatively few of the articles that we see, popular articles, even if they're raising the alarm on climate change, rarely mention the issue of methane. It's all about getting our carbon emissions under control. How do you incorporate that new aspect to the climate change crisis?
Well, I was really happy the way the country was going, trying to tackle methane with the last administration, actually, because they were trying to cap some of the stuff that's going from just the wells and extraction, and a lot of and some of the articles I've read have said we can get more for our buck in a quick way by tackling methane. I mean, kind of, it's got a shorter residence time in the atmosphere.
Right.
And there's just so many things we can do and know how to do already.
You're talking about capturing it or
yeah, and
using
just
it
yeah,
instead of
and just really
releasing it,
getting,
or-
you know, if you take samples above extraction wells and all that, there's just tons in the hole and pipes and things that just gets out into the atmosphere.
Right.
And
But that may not be the big problem, though. The methane that's trapped in the polar ice caps and the permafrost, and even supposedly Gulf of Mexico and other, it doesn't have to just be frozen.
Well, no, that's kind of the absolute horror show side of it. And I try not to, I mention it, but I don't stress it because I don't want to paralyze people.
Well, what's your, from reading that, either popular literature or scientific studies, what's your interpretation of that? Because it seems really dire to me.
Well, with the permafrost melting, which is what I kind of ended my class with actually just like 2 weeks ago, a lot of the carbon is coming because those are very peaty soils with a lot of carbon in the decomposers.
Right.
And some methane is being released, but some of the clethorates, are they called, I think, and the things that are frozen in the seabeds, and in the and in some of the frozen, those being released would totally be scary.
They could be huge, and I don't think there's any way to capture it or mitigate it or anything.
No, and one study I read, which, you know, like I say, I try not to be alarmist, but it very much worried me, is seeing bubbling in lakes in Siberia where it's being released. And I mean, some of the major extinction events, like the Permian, you know, the biggest one 250 million years ago, some people think that some releases from the sea may have been involved, along with a lot of other things, volcanism and stuff. But that, to me, that's the scariest, that's about the scariest, you know, possibility, is the frozen methane being released. And I do worry that not having the ocean be as cold as it is, things that trap it down there are being changed a little bit.
Well, and we should link to some articles about this on our website. I think we maybe, on our Facebook page, I think we maybe posted one, but it would be good to post a few.
Yeah, well, I'll also, this summer, I'll be doing some more research and trying to find articles, and that's one I want to follow up on, because I just saw in Science News, which summarizes different studies, and I haven't gone to the primary source yet on that one, because they tried to frame it in not a catastrophic way, the way I do, because you can scare people into immobility.
So that's a key question that we wanted to ask you, and one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you. And I think we would both agree that it's hard not to be aware of what's going on and be alarmist to some degree. It's hard not to be reading all this information and not be yourself paralyzed into inaction. So particularly, you know, speak about this for yourself personally, but also particularly for the students, the young people you're with. You know, how do you respond to them when you sense that there is hopelessness there? Do they ever actively bring, which of course it's ironic because your name is Hope, but do they actively ever bring up, like I've talked a couple times in classes and have students just like, there's no hope. And so I'm just wondering, how often do you encounter that while you're teaching this course, and how do you talk to the young people about that, to the students?
Like I say, I tread a fine line, trying not to get them in that, scare them so much that there's nothing done. So I try to, you know, if I was talking about it, you know, I'd say, you know, the steps that the last administration had started doing to cap methane and make people aware are a good thing, and also we need to put the money into the science to actually really monitor those Siberian lakes and monitor northern Canada and Alaska and areas to see, you know, what the situation is, and to study the methane releases in the past from ice cores and things like that. So I sometimes frame it a little bit, we need to really learn like mad, you know, so we can anticipate and deal with it.
And understanding that this is not a politics class that you're teaching, but since the two seem so intimately related
they
these
know
days,
my politics, I'm afraid.
Well, but do their politics change at all? Like, do they, for instance, say, "Oh, you're right, we do need that information," and "Oh my God, look what they're trying to do to the EPA right now"? I mean, other countries like Canada and France are inviting our environmental scientists to go there because they don't feel safe in this country anymore.
No, it's just a reversal of things. The students, I mean, again, they get discouraged, but they you know, they, you know, sometimes, like, you know, in the politics where I've said, I mean, I do believe that the reason Congress doesn't do anything is they're totally bought and sold by the gas and oil and power industries. and they should look like stock car drivers and wear their sponsors.
And also Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and those guys would be on there too.
Industrial and health.
Oh, hey, let's not forget Monsanto while we're
right.
Sachs.
And they really are bought and sold. So it's a corporate oligarchy, or I'm not sure. You know what the best term for it is, and sometimes I discourage them a lot when I've gone into that. I assigned Bill McKibben's article, the one from 2012 in the Rolling Stone with the 3 numbers, you know, 2 degrees Celsius, keep it below 565 gigatons is how much more carbon we can put in there and have a hope to keep it at only 2 degrees. And then the 2,795 is the known reserves that Exxon and all the other corporations are sitting on, and to ask them to sit on $20 trillion of assets is going to be tough in this day and age. But it's just, we have to have a, you know, bottom up. It isn't going to happen from the top down. So we just got to keep doing the marches on Washington and vote for senators that believe in science. First off, you know, that's so discouraging that the lack of science is just another theory. It's like it's just
going back into the dark ages.
It is the dark ages.
Flat Earth society.
I saw a great political cartoon one time. Just a quick aside, had a lady walking down a big courtroom, you know, courthouse building, and she said, "I wish all those evolutionists would just jump off the edge of the earth."
That's a very funny joke. I'll have to remember that one.
Well, so just really quickly then, because I just touched on it, but do you or your students ever talk about the connection with U.S. militarism, or not just U.S. militarism, but global militarism? You know, the first of all, just our foreign policy to protect corporate interests and the extractive industries. Well, and you know, ExxonMobil's Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, where did he come from?
Yeah, and he's in that McKibben article, so that does come up.
Well, because of course ExxonMobil spent no money on alternative energy research, you know, for decades, but also just the amount of money that goes into the Pentagon. Right, exactly. The money that goes to the Pentagon being the biggest user of fossil fuels, and also the money that we would need so the UN Environment Program, now this is like just to mitigate the effects of climate change over the next 20 to 30 years would be $650 billion, and people say, oh, that's impossible. Well, that's 1 year of Pentagon spending, right?
Oh yeah, no, our priorities are so wrong with the Pentagon eating up so much. It's I don't talk specifically about the military-industrial complex, which was before energy was the biggest issue ever since Eisenhower warned us in his farewell address. But like Frank Zappa says, politics is the
entertainment division of the military-industrial complex. Again,
yes, very good. Frank Zappa reference. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, but I mean,
Speaking of cultural references, we found out when we first came in here, I mean, we found out about this stuff, I don't know, for me it was like 13 years ago, or other people 10 or more recently. You've known about this and been worried about climate change for how long?
Since you were 8?
Since I was 8 and read about it in my weekly reader.
That's amazing.
An excellent publication, Weekly Reader.
It is.
I learned about the original Mercury 7 astronauts, little blurbs and biography on all those guys. And the other main thing I remember is learning about global warming.
Wow.
It's incredible.
And I'm pretty sure that it was right after the real famous article by Ravel and Dr. Seuss, but a different Dr. Seuss, Hans Seuss, I think, that they said that we're now, that real famous line that they didn't even say it in an ominous way, we're now engaged in a huge worldwide experiment pumping tons of CO2 that's been locked away in rocks for millions of years into the atmosphere. and it'll be interesting to see what we can learn about weather and climate from it.
Okay, so it specifically was CO2, not CFCs or worry about the ozone layer or whatever. It was CO2 they were
Yeah,
talking about.
it was an article actually, that came serendipitously because they were actually trying to fine-tune the radiocarbon dating,
Okay.
which we've screwed up by our nuclear things and burning fossil fuel, because it goes on the principle that a percentage of what's radioactive carbon versus regular,
Right.
and there's less and less
Right.
as it's older and older.
Right.
And they were looking at some tree rings
Because
on
of
the
when
tree.
nuclear testing happened.
No, this is actually just because of burning coal.
Oh, okay.
Because the coal, all the carbon that's in the coal has already lost all its carbon-14. So when you put all that carbon into the atmosphere, you're changing the ratio and with tons and tons more natural carbon. So life out there has a much smaller proportion of it when it uses carbon to make our bodies. And so tree rings that were 5 or 6 years old were 100 years old because they didn't have much C14 in them.
Interesting.
And that's when they were studying that, and then they realized, whoa, we're affecting the atmosphere in a measurable way. We better keep track of this. And it was the next year that Keeling, who Revell brought in to work with him at Scripps out in San Diego or wherever it is, started doing the Hawaii measurements. The famous Keeling curve goes from 1958.
Of which, by the way, we've just cracked 410 parts per million.
Yeah.
I just read that.
Yeah, and this will probably be the first year that in the seasonal, in the end of the winter, we go way down, or end of the summer.
It'll stay above 400.
And do you teach any of the history of that science in your classes too, or no?
A little bit.
Okay, because to me that's very fascinating.
Yeah. I talk about when I do the greenhouse effect kind of series of lectures. I talk about Revell, and one of the reasons Al Gore had Revell as a teacher, and in the movie he shows the Keeling curve, only this much of it when there's this much of it.
Right.
7 or 8 years into the measurements.
Right.
So it just kind of ties in with Gore's why he's gotten on the bandwagon so much.
You're a pretty smart guy. You're a living, breathing example of the dangers of education that Betsy DeVos keeps warning us about.
Yeah.
Look what it's done to you. Well, I don't know if you have any last words. I really appreciate the information and your time. If you have any last words for our dozens of viewers and listeners.
Yeah, well, I do have one thing. I read one paper, I've read a couple papers about how do you get through to people that just you can't get through to.
Right.
And I'm talking about the road workers and stuff, not the, well, they do listen to Rush Limbaugh some, but not the Trump and the Congress. But one of the things it said is get rid of the scientific paper approach. Don't do a long introduction and expect them to care by the time you get to the end of your argument.
Right.
Go right to how it's going to affect them. So one of the things I'd like to do is when my road got wiped out by some, I think it might have been the 3rd of July rains 3 or 4 years ago, and it got down to one lane. It's a dirt road, and I like to ask them, do you think, is this unusual? Is this any, or do you think, are you seeing that you're going to have to, you're replacing more culverts than you used to and doing more road work? Because that they can relate to, because it's something that affects them.
Sure.
So I'm trying to learn more and more how to use that approach. I mean, I'm still too scientific and theoretical.
Right.
But I
talk to people where they are.
Yeah, and just go right to the main point and then backtrack.
Of course, it means more work for them, the road workers. They would love it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that one of our students had an internship last year assessing culverts for repair. And I think that when culverts in Vermont get replaced, they don't replace them with the size they were. They are realizing they make them bigger, anticipating that the flash floods are going to be worse than they are now.
Well, Vermonts tend to be thoughtful about stuff like that.
Yeah, well, we're in a little, sometimes the bubble island we're in compared to some areas.
I just moved from near Washington, D.C., so I thank God for this bubble every day.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of bubble. It's a bubble of stench right now is what it is.
Well, Peter, thank you very much on behalf of Hashtag 15.
Yep, you're welcome.
Really appreciate all the work you're doing, and hopefully I'll have a chance to talk with you again someday.
Sure.
Thank you, Peter. That was great.
You're welcome.